So here we have this movie coming out, which is sort of dressed up as a semi-comedy, light-hearted sort of story, but one of the central themes of it is that an army instructor, one of the Green Beret characters, years ago, killed a goat by sheer mind power by causing it to bleed to death internally. One gets the impression he did it a number of times to a number of army groups, platoons, squads, etc. That it was a routine thing done in the army, certainly by this one instructor. He also, for your information, according to the review, was able to bust bags of ink in an aquarium simply by mind control, you see. So that was tested objectively, and now we've got the story coming out. It was written into a book, and the book is now being made into a Hollywood movie. Now we can talk about how the two groups of people will respond to this rather challenging information. The great difference between the two groups, average people and pseudo-skeptics, seems to be that average people can happily live with this uncertainty factor which is built into everything. It's talked about by famous astronomers and famous scientists. And we will happily get along with the fact that anything can be whipped out from under you because it was a wonderfully supplied piece of fakery. But we don't worry too much about that. We don't get concerned about it in the least. Of course, there's no anxiety or fear whatsoever. It's a source of merriment to many of us, the source of comedy. Whereas the pseudo-skeptics, they respond to this necessary uncertainty that they just can't do. It seems to be a cognitive deficit that they can't include a bit of uncertainty in their belief system. And they take to going on the internet and bad-mouthing anybody else who's willing to live with uncertainty. Anyone who's comfortable with it, well, they have to be bad-mouthed, they have to be punished, they've got to be taught a lesson by the pseudo-skeptics. That's the lazy people who always want information pasted through 500-character keyholes, wanting to be spoon-fed so they can just dispute things from a position of safety. I think it's definitely a cognitive deficit that you can't include a bit of doubt in everything you know and be ready to throw a belief out the window, if you feel you must do it, without bad-mouthing anybody else, without including anybody else in your internal operations. The story goes that someone in the army was a Green Beret, and the instructor one day showed they were using goats as they were actually injuring goats to practice binding them up, binding their wounds, etc. And at the end of the day, they had a live goat left. And the instructor killed it with mind control, you see. That's how it's depicted in the movie, I am led to believe. Now, because this would seem to be out of Hollywood, proclaimed for all to see, obvious evidence of a psychic ability having a physical outcome that is witnessed by many people, written about years later and then put out in a movie, it's kind of like it would tend to crush any doubts in one sense because it's been proclaimed, shouted from the rooftops in a Hollywood movie. Of course, I'm going to tell you first how average people respond to this challenging information. It's a great novelty, it's fascinating. They will go about looking at the situation in a light-hearted way. They'll start thinking about how many goats a day could this person kill, why the poor suffering goat had to die at all, if you could just practice on bags of ink in an aquarium, can he do it to people? More lightheartedly, people might think, this is average people, are likely to think, just by switching things around, could the goat defensively kill the marine instructor doing this exercise? So all kinds of jokes and funny combinations of the scene come into the head of ordinary average people. Now, should you believe this Hollywood movie made from a book based on a reported incident? This is what average people do. They put it into their belief system with an element of doubt. 99% they might believe it. 1% of doubt, though. It seems so convincing, it could be too good to be true and just a wonderful entertainment sort of movie. But what actually happens in the head of the average person is that the information sits there in the belief system for a number of years, in fact decades, awaiting more evidence to either accredit or discredit what you were first told. This is a very typically ongoing and very comfortable experience in the head of the average person. We all go through this. It causes us no distress whatsoever. We can be light-hearted about it if we ultimately find it's a hoax, someone's pulling our leg, and we believe this for 20 years, and we just laugh about it. Well, isn't that amazing? As opposed to the pseudo-skeptics, who will undoubtedly want to challenge the whole thing in every detail and say, well, it's probably a fake goat. Do the Green Beret really exist? There's no scientific evidence they exist. The man who actually reports this in his book is a remote viewer. Shock horror. He teaches remote viewing for free on the island of Hawaii. So you might challenge the existence of the island of Hawaii as well in desperation. Anything to discredit this frightening incident that people can have psychic abilities that kill things. And of course, we would expect James Randi to simulate this very easily by using a drug like warfarin, which causes blood thinning in rats. It's used as a rat poison. And you could simply inject a goat behind the scenes and stare at it, and James Randi could duplicate this feat very, very easily and convincingly. Pseudo-skeptics love to watch these demonstrations. But of course, average people laugh at this. The pseudo-skeptics' belief that reproducing something by fraud is meaningful is one of the great delusions that pseudo-skeptics wallow in. Now, the usual question, is this a scientific thing? Is this no scientific proof this has ever been done, blah, 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 the usual thing trotted out by the pseudo-skeptics? Well, the answer is there's a way to do it yourself, but you don't really have to kill goats. You've already been told you can try practicing on bags of ink in an aquarium. That doesn't hurt anybody. You could try that at home. But could I suggest you go to a place to get a bit of training first? And you go to neilslade.com. He will teach you to click your amygdala backwards and forwards, which is a biochemical, physical part of your brain, and you can do an amazing thing with it. And he will also teach you, if you hang around for a while and practice, to bust small clouds in the air above you, up in the sky, right? Okay? You can learn to do cloud busting. Now, I learned that and took it one step further, and I was able to make people rub their face at a nominated place. I practiced doing it for many months, and I discovered I could do it to my satisfaction. Now, I did that entirely by myself. I did not need battalions of scientists in white coats and clipboards to tell me I had scored a hit. I did not need any magicians to help me think. I'm able to do logical deductive analysis myself. Self-trust seems to be missing from pseudo-skeptics. They always want some kind of authority figure to tell them what's believable, what's kosher, what should be believed, what's okay. It's a major deficit, basically a cause of their cognitive dysfunction. Another argument often brought up, this is where the boundary of science finishes, and everyone thinks where the boundary of science finishes, there is no more reality. Well, I assure you there is. So if a single incident occurs or a single event, it doesn't mean it's not true and didn't happen just because science can't measure it. A single black swan is evidence that many more are likely to exist. You've only got to see one. Similarly, the first platypus delivered to London was declared a hoax by the best scientists of the day, and they were completely wrong. Repeatable evidence later turned up. But the same thing with the single goat episode. It says in the review, which is in this video, there's a link to it, you get the impression that numerous goats were killed in this way to demonstrate something that the Green Beret soldiers could be trained to do, to show them that their mind extended beyond their faces, beyond their heads, beyond the bag of skin they normally live in. So this is all terribly challenging to pseudo-skeptics, and a wonderful novelty, an exhilarating novelty to ordinary people. Now, for all the things I've told you, if you attack me below this video about Neil Slade and cloud busting and all that, then you are a pseudo-skeptic because you're attacking me, whereas you can go and learn to do it all yourself, but I know you won't have the mental energy to do so. That's another problem with pseudo-skeptics.